The Effect of Urbanization on Local Lakes, a presentation by Owens DPilote and MChandler for Limnology, course code ENVR 2013. We will be discussing what urbanization is, where it is being seen, who is being affected, and how we can prevent the impacts of urbanization on our local lakes. What is urbanization? Urbanization can be defined as the rapid and massive growth of and migration to large cities or the establishment of new ones. Positive and negative consequences can result, including some of these issues are employment, sanitation, housing, sewage, water, fire, social welfare, role of the government, and political machines, or controlling organizations. Today we'll be looking at the role of urbanization and its effects on the natural environment, more specifically the aquatic environment, our local lakes. The phenomenon of urbanization is usually the response of individuals wanting to be closer to their work or to others. As the population of the world increases, we are now looking for new areas to exploit, just like the Muskokas. The construction of new homes, businesses, educational institutes, and government offices are all seen with urbanization. Urbanization has many effects, which will be discussed further in this presentation. Some of the effects include increased pollution, specifically phosphorus, which has detrimental impacts on local fish species, benthics, as well as our native plants, as well as reduced riparian zones, which result in increased water contamination and runoff.
Millions of people travel to Ontario's cottage country annually to enjoy the many wonders it has to offer, whether it be for fishing, hunting, golfing, boating, heading to their cottage, or just for a weekend getaway from their busy lives. One factor contributing to the urbanization of these areas include that once people come and visit this area, they want to own their own piece of property that backs onto a beautiful scenic lake, or even have a place close enough to the water so they can walk. As the national population grows, so does the size of small towns and communities. Another factor to consider is that Greater Toronto Area is ever expanding. More and more people are tending to reside north and commute to the city. In the past 20 years, there has been a dramatic increase in the number of structures being built along the shorelines of Lake Simcoe and the lakes in the Muskoka region. With increasing development comes increasing stresses on the surrounding aquatic environments. One area that has seen noticeable changes is the Muskoka Lakes region. This area has been rated one of Ontario's top tourist destinations and is home to thousands of cottagers and permanent residents. The Muskoka Lakes area is also home to many celebrities and pro athletes, both present and past. In 2010, it was recorded that there's an estimated 8,000 shore-accessible properties, averaging a price of $2.1 million. On Lake Muskoka, Lake Joseph, and Lake Rosso, the total estimated property value has reached over $17 billion. With this increase of shoreline residents come the increase of boat traffic and the possibility of water contamination from fluids used to run and maintain these boats. These lakes are some of the deepest in the area, with Lake Joseph reaching a depth of over 100 meters, and are home to a large number of lake trout populations, and is ranked as one of the best lake trout fishing lakes in southern Ontario.
As development increases due to urbanization, there are many effects that can occur. The building of local infrastructure such as roads, ditches, and culverts creates an increase in the amount and intensity of point source pollution. Point source pollutants are easier to control, more readily identifiable, and measurable. However, the contaminants they carry tend to be more concentrated. Non-point sources of pollution are the consequence of agricultural, urban, and industrial runoff, erosion associated with construction, deforestation, pesticide and fertilizer applications, and hydrological modification. Non-point sources are greatly influenced by deforestation, especially deforestation of the riparian zone. As runoff is channeled into lakes, the riparian zone would normally act as a filter and a buffer before the contaminants could reach the aquatic ecosystem. Any reduction in the riparian zone is directly linked to a decrease in the quality of the ecosystem. The roots of plants growing along the lake shore provide stability and collect sediment, preventing shorelines from being washed away. The plants in the riparian zone filter and purify water, and the thick layer of low foliage sifts out impurities from surface runoff. Vegetation and soils soak up and store water during high rainfall events and help to prevent flooding. Leaves and branches break the force of falling rain, and the rough surface of leaf litter and broken twigs slows the water, which is then absorbed by the soil and taken up by plant roots. In the same way, trees and other vegetation in the riparian areas help to regulate nutrients, especially detrimental nutrients such as phosphates and nitrates. The aquatic and riparian areas are crucial for fish, providing them with food and shelter as well as shade to keep the water cool. In an undisturbed environment, energy and materials flow through the natural system, and nutrients are held in a local cycle. As there is a movement towards urbanization, there is a reduction in the ecosystem's capacity to hold materials, as they are held in the very vegetation that is removed. Phosphorus is an extremely important nutrient, as is the limiting factor for the growth of plants. Urbanization also changes the topography of the environment, which directs larger amounts of water into a system that already has a lowered capacity to hold nutrients such as phosphorus. The largest anthropomorphic factor to phosphorus levels in the urbanized areas is the effect of wastewater treatment and sewage drainage. In the Muskoka region, the majority of the buildings are cottages which are linked to septic tanks. Septic tanks are engineered to treat wastewater and release cleaner water. However, these systems are designed to also release phosphorus into the environment. As urbanization of the Muskokas increases, so does the level of phosphorus into the local environment. Since phosphorus is the limiting nutrient in the growth of vegetation, and increasing the amount of phosphorus available will increase the plant growth. Algae are especially affected by the addition of phosphorus into the aquatic system, and when algal growth is excessive, other aquatic organisms are endangered. Algae places a huge demand on oxygen, first during respiration at night, but oxygen demand is especially high when the algae dies, sinking to the bottom of the water, increasing sedimentation and blanketing the normal spawning grounds of many fish species. Decaying algae also creates a massive demand on oxygen, potentially using all of the available oxygen, turning healthy waters hypoxic. This forces fish to either leave or die, and kills all organisms unable to leave the affected area.
Urbanization can affect individual aquatic species or can have a domino effect on a variety of species. When we refer to the trophic levels of an aquatic environment, if one level is affected, it can have effects on species either higher or lower on the food chain, or even both. There are many ways urbanization can affect lakes, including changes to the water chemistry of the lake, increasing the rate of which nutrients and contaminants enter the water can affect plant life and increase the chances of algal bloom development. With these changes occurring to natural shoreline structures and other shoreline developments come the reduction of benthic species and fish habitat. Shoreline development also has the potential to destroy or negatively modify future or presently used fish spawning grounds. Plants and algae can be noticeably affected just by looking from the shoreline or over the side of a boat. Here on the left are images of sand dumped for someone's private beach. This sandy area reaches 10 meters out from the shoreline and stretches 12 meters along the shore, resulting in an area of 120 square meters of uninhabitable shoreline. The image on the right is of an algal bloom floating along someone's personal dock. These blooms are caused by increased nutrients into the water, and these blooms change the water quality by blocking out sunlight needed by plants to produce oxygen through photosynthesis, creating dissolved oxygen. As the floating algal blooms die off, they sink to the bottom, and as they decompose, they create a biochemical oxygen demand, which reduces the amount of available oxygen in the water. Quality of water, based around nutrient levels and water contaminants, can also play an important role in the development of local benthic communities. Different nearshore invertebrates have different tolerances for water quality, as shown in the diagram on the right. You can see how the tolerance of these invertebrates and how they can be used to indicate the quality of the water they inhabit. Also, By eliminating shoreline structures such as rocks, logs, and other deadfall, you eliminate habitat for these small, sometimes microscopic creatures. When some people think about building a dock, adding sand or rock, dredging the shoreline, or removing deadfall and vegetation so they can have their personal beach or improve the looks of their property, they don't usually consider the fish. Some of Ontario's most popular sport fish have annual habits that can be affected by changing the characteristics of the shallow waters of shorelines. Bass, lake trout, and walleye look to be very different fish, but one thing they have in common is that they all seem to return to the same area for spawning each year. Also, all of these fish have different triggers to start their spawning. One of the major triggers is water temperature. If the water stays too warm or too cold, it can delay the reproduction habits of these fish. There are a large number of different fish species in Ontario's lakes. Bass, lake trout, and walleye, along with most other fish species, can be affected by urbanization and change to water chemistry. These species include yellow perch, northern pike, muskie, pumpkin seed, also known as sunfish, crappie, whitefish, herring, and the small baitfish that inhabit shallow waters. These stressor effects can be caused by shoreline development, the introduction of pollution, changing the water quality through different means, and can even be caused by the overexploitation of fish populations through commercial and recreational fishing.
In considering the damage humanity has placed upon the Earth's aquatic ecosystems, it is important to note that not all areas have been affected beyond recovery. Pollution control and restoration must be a major focus in future development. The simplest way to prevent the negative effects of urbanization is to look more closely at the ways in which urbanization takes place. Low-impact development is a relatively new method for stormwater management design, which is intended to mimic the natural hydrologic cycle in order to reduce runoff. Low-impact development incorporates objectives like minimizing the disturbance, increasing drainage flow paths, increasing infiltration opportunities, reducing impervious coverage, and preserving and recreating natural landscape features. Low-impact shoreline development is ideal, but without legislation, it is unlikely to become common practice in the Muskoka Lakes. Riparian area regulations have been used in many regions. Perhaps similar legislation could help protect riparian and aquatic environments in the Lake Muskoka region. In BC, land developers and individual property owners are required to hire a qualified environmental professional to assess the habitat for potential aspects, develop mitigation measures, and avoid impacts of development to fish and fish habitat.
Unfortunately, urbanization is here to stay as our world is continuing to grow, and so it is important to find new methods to help prevent the impacts associated with urbanization. This includes some of the following: pollution reduction, which also means recycling programs and processes that allow us to reuse old building materials to create new buildings, as well as LEED certification, allows companies to decrease their environmental impacts and are rewarded with the LEED certification. Lastly, there have been new studies and research looking into new materials and designs for man-made structures close to environmental habitats to help native biota, such as frogs and other amphibians. That means looking into the slope, material type, and locations of the construction materials to see how it would impact some of those natural biota. In conclusion, we have learned what urbanization is, which is the migration and rapid growth of an area turning into a city, an example of where has it been seen, such as Lake Simcoe. We've learned some of the effects of urbanization, including increased pollution, increased nutrients, that is phosphorus, and about shoreline development and the impacts of a reduced riparian zone. Who is influenced by urbanization was also discussed. That is some of the invertebrates, some of the natural fish and plant species found within the watershed. We have also discussed methods of prevention as well as new studies to help reduce the impacts of urbanization. Unfortunately, urbanization is going to happen as long as the world's population increases and so investing in resources to help manage and reduce its impact is very important. In conclusion, we have learned what urbanization is, which is the migration and rapid growth of an area turning into a city, an example of where has it been seen, such as Lake Simcoe. We've learned some of the effects of urbanization, including increased pollution, increased nutrients, that is phosphorus, and about shoreline development and the impacts of a reduced riparian zone. Who is influenced by urbanization was also discussed, that is some of the invertebrates, some of the natural fish and plant species found within the watershed. We have also discussed methods of prevention as well as new studies to help reduce the impacts of urbanization. Unfortunately, urbanization is going to happen as long as the world's population increases, and so investing in resources to help manage and reduce its impact is very important.